Warning, don't listen if it's a podcast you want. This is a Chumcast. Just your basic gabfest among chums. A little news, some entertainment, an annoying opinion or two, and, if you're lucky, maybe even a chuckle.
They've done studies, 60% of the time, it works every time.
So it's time to buckle up. Whetstone Entertainment, in association with Is Chill Productions, presents Don't Listen, a basic Chumcast. And here are your hosts, Big Red and the Shebs.
Remember, everyone, just don't be yourselves.
All right, here we go. The Don't Listen Chumcast. They call me Big Red.
They call me the Shebs.
And you're the Shebs.
I am the Shebs. And this is a special edition, a special episode. This is not episode 4. This is the James Blake episode.
Yep, that's right. A very personal. I don't like to get personal. Very personal on these Chumcasts.
No, we talked about your gonorrhea before, but yeah, that's beyond that. Yeah, that's about as personal we've gotten so far.
Well, we just had to do that for a disclaimer because of all the people that I had infected.
That's true.
With the gonorrhea. But seriously, this is going to be probably pretty tough. Shebs, let's just see if I can get through this. I want a permanent record of my father's passing. He passed on February the 6th at 9 o'clock. I was by his bedside, which is a blessing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's just see if I can get through this. I every day you wake up and you don't actually. It's like so surreal. Like you don't even really know if it's real or not. You have to relive it kind of every day. So my father passed away. He was my best friend, so we're going to get through this today one way or another. I don't know if this is the best idea or not, but I know that a lot of our friends, a lot of people our age that we know are going to be going through this.
That's right.
If they haven't already gone through it.
That's right. You and I, during this, leading up to this, you and I talked a lot because
my dad was in the hospital.
And my parents are getting older, and
they're not getting younger.
They're not getting younger, no.
And I was like, you better get your shit lined up, dude.
I know.
You better get your power of attorney, and you better get your whole will and trust all lined up because. But before we get into the medical thing with my dad, just a little historical context on my dad, So you're hearing from all these people. He just passed, 10 days ago. And it was unexpected, even though he was in the hospital for 3 or 4 weeks.
Right.
But it was unexpected. So you hear from all these people, and all these people share these great stories. And my father was one of, I think, 7 or 8 kids. And he was born right in the middle of the Depression in North Carolina in 1932.
Wow.
And his dad never had a job. He was a vagabond. He went from job to job to job, and made very little money. So the family, he had 7 or 8 brothers and sisters, and so a large family who obviously didn't have a TV and believed in reproduction.
That was their TV.
Reproduction, was a big thing. That was probably, very poor, very, very poor. My dad, they didn't have any plumbing. One of the stories my dad told me, and this is in rural North Carolina. This is in Montgomery County, North Carolina, really in the middle of nowhere. And they had no electricity, no indoor plumbing. Parents were both illiterate. And my dad would tell stories about how everybody was sleeping on the floor or sharing a bed or something. And my dad was the 3rd oldest. He had 2 older sisters, and the rest of them were younger than him. And I was so fortunate because we became best friends in the latter part of his life. And, we talked about everything. I got to know him. He became like my best friend. So he would share these stories that were so embarrassing for him. Son, you got it easy. when it was cold in the winter, we didn't have a toilet. So we would have to go outside, and they didn't even have an outside toilet at that point. And we'd have to go outside, do a number 2, find a leaf, a piece of bark, whatever was around to wipe our butts. That was it. And, it was like 19 degrees outside. So it was humble. He was very humble, and he grew up without anything at all in the middle of nowhere. So the only way, and, he did get his high school diploma, but he said it was like the equivalent of like a 5th grade education. So he had a brother who was 2 or 3 years younger than him. See, this is the story of my life. The phone never stops ringing. It's just never. It's all right. It's probably some solicitor from Vietnam wanting to sell me another 17-year-old girl. So his brother Curtis, my uncle Curtis, it was so bad. The only way, you can give that to me. Give that to me.
I'm okay.
Give the phone to me. The only way, so everybody just dreamed of getting out of this town. However they could get out of town, they were going to do whatever they did. So my dad's brother, my uncle Curtis, who was, maybe 3 or 4 years younger than my dad, joined the military when he was 16 years old to get the hell out of town. That was the only way you could get out of town. So obviously my Uncle Curtis never graduated from high school. Right. But my dad was a lot like you. He was not taking any risks. He was scared of everything. He wasn't taking any chances. Uncle Curtis was like me. He was the one jumping off a tree into the top branch on a tree into a river where he didn't know what was underneath the water at all, just have fun. So he was the risk taker. And so my dad was like, yeah, he can go to the military and see how it's going to work out, and then I'll see if I'm going to go.
Let somebody else go first. Yeah, story of my life.
So my dad ended up joining the Air Force, and I'll never forget the story of taking the Trailways bus and how scary it was, taking being picked up for the military, all these, idiotic kids, illiterate kids from the South, from North Carolina, South Carolina, wherever, and taking that long ride. First time he had ever been away from home.
Yeah, I bet, right?
So, but as life would go on for my dad, it turned out, I always joked with him that he was like Forrest Gump. He had a permanent horseshoe up his ass because he went to the Korean War, didn't have to serve in the war. Mm-hmm. He became a mechanic in Luxembourg, Germany, where he worked on jets. He worked on all the jets that went back and forth to the war. He only stayed 2 years, and he came home and did not have a job. Went back to Bisco, that's his hometown where his parents were, and he wandered the streets, had nothing going on. Finally, a year later, he gets a job at an airline in Washington, D.C. called Capital. Mm-hmm. After 1 year of making $2 an hour in the big city, he had never experienced much of the big city, but living just outside in Arlington, Virginia. He got a call. He got called in by his boss, and his boss says, hey, if you want to keep your job, you got to go to San Francisco. We're being bought out by an airline called United. So my dad asked my mom to marry. They met in Virginia. They got married, and they went across the country in a beat up vehicle. Like, I think the old Jed Clampett vehicle was the vehicle that they took. And was your grandmother sitting on a rocking chair on top or anything? I think she may have been in the trunk, but okay. She was definitely. So they went across country, and that was their romantic. And
that must have been awesome.
The romantic honeymoon, right?
From a romance standpoint.
Oh, my dad was not romantic.
Oh, are you kidding me?
That was a big letdown.
He's the picture of romance, if you ask me. Yeah, but that must have been exciting at some level. Really exciting.
So here's the kicker. They come out to San Carlos. They rent a place on Laurel Street. I'm not going to go through this forever, but they rented an apartment on Laurel Street. I forget. I mean, we would drive by there. My dad would show me. So I know exactly where the apartment complex was that they lived. And they bought the house in San Carlos for a whopping $18,000, and I believe like 1960. So he went on to worked for United for 44 years as a union mechanic. It was a gold mine. It was an absolute gold mine. So you imagine this. My dad was a self-proclaimed hillbilly from North Carolina.
Right.
So he's from nowhere. He comes out to what he called the land of milk and honey, right? And he takes this job at what turns out to be the worldwide most corporate huge airline of all time, right? Where they build the maintenance base for the international maintenance base.
Right, yeah.
So my father, coming from no money at all, worked every single ounce of overtime he could ever get. He couldn't believe it. As a union mechanic, of course, you have to do some work, but basically there was a lot of coffee drinking, a lot of socializing, a lot of cigarette smoking. And although my father was not a cigarette smoker, but plenty of guys out there were.
Yeah.
Right. So they would squeeze in a little bit of work in between, cups of coffee. But, he spent 44 years. So we got to fly all over the world for free. And that was and that's kind of our bond, right? You somehow you became an airline guy.
I'm a commercial pilot, yeah. Flight instructor, yeah.
Where'd that come from?
No idea. My mother's father, my grandfather, took him to the airport to watch airplanes. I don't know.
That's where so no airline mechanic in your family, no pilots?
No, just there was some on my dad's cousin's side. There's a Shepley Aviation down in Vegas or in Arizona.
Oh, somewhere.
All right. But we, no, I was the first kind of in our whole side of the family to pick up flying.
So the horseshoe is directly up his ass, right? Yeah. He comes out of nowhere. That's why I would call him Forrest Gump. He would come out of nowhere. I mean, nowhere north. Literally, it's still nowhere in North Carolina. My family's going to kill me for saying that because they still live in that area. But literally, nothing. And he comes to the Bay Area when it was at its peak. I mean, we got to live through the 80s when it was fantastic too. But I mean, San Carlos, Redwood City, Belmont, I mean, it was beautiful. It was without the traffic, right? 280 was not even constructed. It had not even been built. No. They were building it while he was...
Vacant lots everywhere, so you felt like there was so much open space left and right. Yeah.
Yeah, literally, my dad called it the land of milk and honey. And I just think that, a lot of it's timing, a lot of it's luck, and a lot of it is the fact that my father was, very religious. He was born in the South. He was a deacon in his church. He was, very deep. I was raised in I was the rebel.
Yeah, but you talked about when we were, in high school and stuff, you would church stuff.
That's all we did.
Yeah, you were all into doing church stuff.
That's all we did. Like my dad was always taking us to the church. He was a deacon there.
Did we do like broom ball? Didn't you have like some church stuff with broom ball and the ice and stuff? We would all go down and
that was like the youth program that we had there. Yeah. And we cleaned up the church. We fixed the church. We drank coffee at the church. We ate donuts at the church. He was a very religious person. And I think that that comes a lot from being so poor growing up and seeing so much destruction and never, always wanting and never having. Like, here's a story I can tell you about my dad growing up real quick. And then we're going to get into the medical stuff. But I love my dad. I'm going to miss him. I'm going to miss my dad very much. So this is a great story. My dad never had any clothes growing up. He had to wear the same clothes, right? And he was at fifth grade. He was like in fifth grade, and they were out on. It was a cold day, and they were out on the playground. And he had like a t-shirt on and shorts, no socks, and like holes in his shoe. He had nothing on, basically naked, and it was cold. And the teacher said, "James, what are you doing out here? You cannot be out here like this." And he was like embarrassed. He was very embarrassed. And she took him to the principal's office and made a big deal about it. My dad was like just embarrassed. And they were like, "After school today, you need to go see this lady." And my dad didn't have any idea but he had to go. So he went to go see this lady, and she gave him a jacket with a zipper. And my dad, when my dad was telling me this story, he said that this is gonna make me cry too. He was like, and they gave me this jacket with a zipper, and I skipped all the way home. I skipped and ran and jumped all the way home, and I got home, and I had this, I had this jacket with a brand new zipper. It was a zipper. I was like, what's the deal? Were zippers just invented or something? What was the deal with the zipper? He's like, oh no, it's a shiny zipper. So it changed the way I looked at zippers. All of a sudden I was like, I don't want the hoodie that goes over my head. I want the hoodie with the zipper. Right?
It's amazing. Yeah, he's remembering his first time with a new zipper. Big moments in life, right?
Yeah, like it's just crazy, right? So I was like, Dad, whatever happened to that jacket? And he's like, I don't know. I don't know. So anyway, let's fast forward. My dad is married to my mom, and they've been married for 62 years. I'm not going to say they've always been in bliss. In fact, they went through a lot of problems, right? Like anybody would in a marriage. But that says something.
But you did growing up. It took during. Let's just go to your high school years, right, where you become much more aware of your parents and so forth, and their
dysfunctional marriage.
Of who they are, their backgrounds and stuff. Are you saying that you didn't know? You really didn't discover all this stuff? Did you have some ideas, or did you not really get into this until later in life?
Yeah, I didn't get into it until later in life. My dad was always working. He was like, "Oh my God, I'm making money. This is real. Oh my God, I'm never spending it.
Hey, banking it."
And he was cheap as shit. I mean, we always went to the Sizzler, or we go to Bay Meadows for like dollar movies, or
Right.
There he was cheap. So there was no getting to know my dad he was my dad. So there was no getting, he was working all the time, and he very rarely would be able to even come to my basketball games.
Right. Yeah.
But when he could, he would, but his priority was to take care of his family. That was really where he was at. And it was probably to get a little space from mom. Right. That was probably playing it, and space from me, because I was a pain in the ass kid too. Right. So, at any rate, that's a little bit of a historical context to who my father was. Right. And people always referred to my dad as Jimmy Boy, or he's a good old boy. And my dad referred to himself. So very laid back, very Southern. And it was very fun growing up with two Southern parents with accents here in the Bay Area, because nobody else had that.
No, it was half the fun calling you was hoping your mom would answer the phone and go, "That boy, I don't know." That boy.
Yeah. So, and every summer we would get on plane. We'd never spend summers here. We would always get on a plane and go back to my parents. My mom is from Wilmington, North Carolina. And my dad is from near, like a little hole in the wall near Greensboro, Montgomery County. So we were never here for summers. But so, I think let's just fast forward to the medical thing. So
but real quick, I think it's important just in context that you ended up buying the house from your parents. They moved out, and they
went back to North Carolina.
Yeah. And then for a while, but what I thought was always was pretty remarkable was that, as they got older in life, you took them back in. And
Right.
you became their parents.
They were my kids.
They became your kids. You started, for years now, you referred to them as your kids because you took care of your mom and dad, which I thought was just very, pretty remarkable. Really good man.
Pretty difficult. But now I wouldn't change it for the world. So what happened was my dad actually got sick. And this is 2 years ago, and all of his healthcare. This is something that I kind of want to share with people. All of his healthcare as an elderly guy, when he was a veteran, so he decided to go through the VA. So my dad started wandering around the house late at night, very confused, and this was literally out of nowhere, and collapsing on the floor, and urinating everywhere. And this was literally out of nowhere. The day before this kind of stuff started happening, he was fine. People were commenting on, they couldn't believe how old he was at the time, which was about 87, 88 years old. And he was still driving at this time. So, I thought he was having a stroke, or I didn't know what was going on. So we take him into the VA. Turns out that he has a UTI, which is a urinary tract infection, which I had never heard of before that. So he was a problem. He was a problem in the hospital, because at night, being in a hospital stay and you're delusional and you're acting nuts, you're getting up out of your bed. You're getting up out of your bed and you're falling and you're breaking things in a hospital. You're a liability. So I did not. I don't know if you remember us talking about this, but this was totally unexpected. I did not even know what power of attorney was.
Right.
And my father is calling me every day, delusional, come get me out of this place. The lawyers are surrounding me. And I'm like, Dad, what are you talking about? He was talking about the doctors, right? He had broken some equipment there. He had been walking around at night. Had become a liability, and my dad was signing off on all of this crazy stuff. So I didn't know what power of attorney was. So they eventually, and then this is when my family's telling me, oh my God, you have to get the power of attorney. You have to figure it out. Too late. We're already in the game, right? So they told my dad, this is at the VA hospital in Palo Alto, that everybody says, oh, it's the most kick-ass hospital you can ever go. Let me tell you, no hospital kicks ass. You go there to die. That's what you're doing in a hospital. So they told my dad that he was going to a 5-star resort. They were going to give him a tour of a 5-star resort, and then he could decide whether he was going to stay or not. And what they did was they got him to sign off on that, and he went to a nursing home, the Carlmont Nursing Home. Mm-hmm. During COVID, we had no rights. Gavin fucked the whole world on that. Sorry for you people who love Gavin, but obviously your dad wasn't in a nursing home that was completely shut down during COVID. So we had no rights. We couldn't see him, even with a clean COVID test. We had nothing. By the time we got in there, he was a sack of potatoes in the corner. They had stolen all of his clothes, and they had basically ignored him completely. He was just sitting, he was a mess. So we got lucky with that. We got a break because he ended up Ramboing. He broke out of that place. He couldn't even walk. He couldn't even walk at the time, but he was smart enough to scout out the nurses in that nursing home, figure out how to get out. And he snuck out at 3:00 in the morning, got outside, didn't trip a single, camera or a single alarm, or so I was told. He got out the front door and he started walking down towards the Carlmont Shopping Center at 4 o'clock in the morning. And they were like, Mr. Blake, huge liability, right? Where are you going, Mr. Blake? I'm going to get a sandwich at Key Market. I think they said he called it Key Market. And I was like, and they called me. This is crazy. They called me at 4 o'clock in the morning, and they were like, this Asian girl of some sort, I don't know, it doesn't matter. But she was like, your father's crazy. 4 o'clock in the morning. Your father's crazy. He's got Alzheimer's. He's got dementia. You need to get down here right now and pick him up. And I'm like, it's 4 o'clock in the morning. I have rights. I don't care what your rights are. He snuck out of the building. You need to get here right now. And I go, okay, we're going to need to talk about this at about 7 o'clock in the morning, because you're breaking about every rule on the when your parents go into when we go into a nursing home, in order to get out of that nursing home, they by law have to have an exit plan. By law, they have to have it on paper, right? This is what we're going to do you're going to have an in-home people come by and take care of you. You're going to go to get therapy. You're going to go, whatever it is, they have to have that by law. And that by a certain amount of days or weeks or whatever. They didn't have any of that. But here's the way that worked. So I was like, Dad's not ready to come home. But But in 5 days, they had contacted the insurance people, and the insurance people were like, don't worry about it. We'll handle it. So the person that was in charge of all the people there were like, your dad's ready to go. Your dad's fine. He's ready to go. So he came home. And they lined that all up. And I was like, come on, I'll take you home. So dad got home and he was good. As soon as he got cooking, he got home cooking, he got his own bed, he turned it around within 7 days, but then he fell, hit his head, he was on blood thinners and had to go back to a nursing home. So he had to go back to the hospital, and then the whole thing went again, and he had to do another. So he survived like 2 30-day stints in the Viet Cong jungle, dude. Seriously. Like, a nursing home I promised him he would never, ever go back to a nursing home ever again. It was the most horrific thing I had ever witnessed. So if anybody's listening out there, unless you have like a hookup and you got something, you got an inside scoop, that's another place people go to die. People don't get, dude, at Carmont, they stole everything. They stole 2 pairs of sweats. They took everything, took his wallet, everything. We never got any of it. Right?
Really? That's
dude. I know that you had a rough go with that too, right? With your mom, you had to go pull her out of there too, right?
Yeah. She had a stint in a what do you call it? Recovery facility. Yeah, that was not a pleasant experience.
They call it a rehab facility.
Rehab facility, yeah.
Which they can go fuck themselves because there's nothing rehab going on there.
It was very eye-opening. Yeah.
So anyway, dad survived all of that, right? And he got back to normal, right? And again, even at that age, you hear this stuff of, your dad is old. He's going to die. There's very little respect for old people. So anyway, we'll fast forward. So he survived that, and he got a lot better. Like he was pretty much good to go. And we were really enjoying our time together. Like, I would take him to Harry's Hofbrau to see his old retirees there. I would take him to Burger King and to McDonald's. I mean, we hung out. I made time. I got to ask him it's just like this gift, right? Like when you look back at it, it's like this gift. Like I was able to ask him these personal questions about how many hookers he screwed,
what was the answer?
In Europe, well, I don't know if I got a straight answer on that, but I got to ask him what it was like to be in the military. We hung out with all of these old mechanic friends that, 80-year-old guys that would go have dollar coffees at McDonald's and Burger King, right? So get over the last couple of years. So getting to know these guys, I got to know who my dad was at work, right? I never knew what my dad was like at the workplace. But these guys would always share these stories about, so it was like amazing. Like it was just a really great experience becoming it was like a gift, to become for him to become my best friend so late in life. It was just amazing. So, but by the way, the story is I ended up getting the power of attorney when my dad went through all that. I ended up figuring out what that was. And luckily, we ended up contacting the family lawyer, and we ended up getting our family trust all completely handled. And then there were some mistakes with that. There were some real complications with that I was unaware of. Regarding some properties and regarding some money and all that kind of stuff that we had to have reworked that we didn't know. Your parents are probably like mine. They're like, once we do this, it's not easy. You don't want to do a will. You don't want to do a trust. So once you do it, you kind of put it away in the closet and you let the dust build up on it. And you don't worry about it. But going through that experience was really enlightening. When he was going to the 5-star resort, it was very enlightening, right? We had to get all that stuff handled. So, and that was funny because my dad didn't want to give me anything. Like he's never given me anything. I drove the shittiest cars. My mom was the one who bought my clothes. My dad was hoarding money. He was digging holes in the back of the yard, hiding money in Krugerrands and shit, So, you have to get the power of attorney. You have to get the power of attorney, and you have to make sure that everything is lined up, because as you go through this, there's a lot, even though we had everything lined up for dad passing, there's complications that come up every all of them. So anyway, this was unexpected. I don't want to bore everybody to tears because, people are already going to judge me on this, right? They're already going to be like, this is a very private thing. Why would, Big Red bother talking about this kind of stuff? But I think it'll help people. I think we're all in the same boat. Like our parents are all getting old if they haven't already passed. I had no parents that had passed. I had never been through death before. So
did you know your father's parents, your grandparents?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. They both lived too long too. They both lived very long lives. Very simple. My grandma dipped snuff. We don't want to get into all that.
No, I was just curious.
Yeah. Great people. Oh yeah. My grandpa, Kenny Herman, he had no teeth, but he would gum everything. Like he would, he'd eat a candy bar, he'd eat chips, he'd eat whatever. He would gum it all. And he also worked in a sawmill. He had never had a real job, worked all over the place. But he worked in a sawmill for a brief time, and he lost a couple of fingers.
Really?
So as a kid, I always got busted for staring at his fingers. He'd always be like, what are you staring at, boy? What happened to your fingers? I couldn't get enough of that story. So anyway, let's get to the current state of affairs. So this is going to be difficult. So, and by the way, this isn't easy to talk about. I really just want a permanent record. Yeah. Right. This is kind of for me and you. I want to have this in 15 years when I'm in the hospital. Right. I want to have this. I keep forgetting stuff like every day. It's only been 10 days. And like I was telling you, it's like so surreal when you lose, first parent I've lost, and it's so surreal. So I just want a permanent record. And if I can, I've never felt any pain like this before. Like I've never felt anything remotely close to this before. The loss, the grief, all of it. I've never felt anything like it.
No, and even though you knew you were on this kind of final pathway, right?
Yeah.
You think you would be prepared, but not until you.
With this, Dad's 90. Dad's birthday was in December, so he's 91, and he. Remember me telling you that he was having some skin cancer removed?
Yes. Yeah.
So he had some skin cancer from his, and my dad had some pre-existing, he had some heart failure, but we had that under control. He was doing pretty good with that. He had some leukemia with mild leukemia that nobody was going to touch. He didn't, he walked on his own. He did laundry. He, he was 100% independent. People could not believe that he was 91 years old. So he went to go get this ear, and they had to put him under, right? So they took part of his ear off, and then they grafted some skin on there. And they, what's the stuff that they use to put you under?
Yeah,
fentanyl.
Yeah.
They used fentanyl to put him under. And I didn't know that until I went to go pick him up. And, I looked at, you have to sign him out and all that kind of stuff and you look at and I'm like, fentanyl. They're like, oh, this is, it's not fentanyl that's killing people. It's like the fentanyl, it's a great drug. I was like, okay. So he never really recovered. He never really he was going through like 2 months of these dermatology people just chiseling on his skin every week. And it was wearing him out. And right. I don't know if I will, you beat yourself up when your parents pass and you're in charge of everything. And, you beat yourself up about some decisions that you make as the power of attorney. You have to make some decisions. And I chose to continue to let a 91-year-old guy go in there and get chiseled on by these dermatologists like every week. They were taking something off his skin like every week, but they couldn't get rid of a wart that he had on his finger. So we kept waiting for him to get back to 100% after that recovery from that ear thing where they put him out. And he got to about 70, 75%, but he never really fully got back. Mm-hmm. And then it was kind of like a cascade. So he started falling. He got delusional. And I was like, hey, man, I got to get you to the hospital. And nope, I'm not going. Nope, shut up, kid. I ain't going. And I'm like, okay, so I can't legally duct tape you and throw you in the car. I'd like to, but I can't. So you're going to make that decision and you're going to live with it. And he's like, all right, boy. All right, that's the way it'll go. And I'm like, that's the way it's going. Well, he got so bad, falling and hitting his head and beating the shit out of himself, that he finally said, okay, I'll go. I had to trick him. I had to tell him that we were going to get some $1 biscuits at McDonald's or something like that, right? But I got him to go, and we got to the ER, and they were like, your dad's fine. I can't believe he's we did all these tests, and they were like, we're a little bit concerned about about the confusion. You need to make an appointment with the neurologist to see if he has Parkinson's. But he's fine. Take him home. Give him water. Get him on a walker. He's good. We got him home, and a couple of weeks later, it just got worse. It got progressively worse. And I think this is what happens with aging people. You know, it can get complicated. So it got worse. So I took him back to the ER again, and they were like, your dad's fine, but did you know your dad has 4 cracked ribs? And I was like, no. And the doctor was like, yeah. I keep rubbing I rubbed his rib area, and I rubbed it real hard and asked him if that was painful, and he said he didn't even wince. He didn't even wince. And he had a completely torn rotator cuff. And he didn't complain about that either. So I was like, that's kind of weird. He's like, yeah, because I didn't know about it. You know, I was just picking Dad off the floor. I was picking him up off the floor. One funny story is, so I was picking him off the floor or, somewhere. He was always falling somewhere, right? And miraculously, he wasn't, he was still alive. Like, I mean, he didn't break his neck. He didn't break anything. I mean, that I knew. Oh, he also had chips. He had some chips in his elbow. He was pretty banged up, but, he didn't break his neck or anything. One morning, it's like 4 o'clock in the morning, and I hear my dad going, hello? 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 Oh! I'm like, oh my God, did he fall again? Did he fall again? This is like some sort of a record, and I'm being honest, I'm laying in my bed going, I'm just exhausted. I'm just like, oh my God, dude. And this is, I wake up early. Right. So this is literally like, 45 minutes or an hour before I get up. And I'm like, oh my God, dude, I just got to listen to this for a few. Hello? 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 Then you'd hear him, moving around on the floor. He was on the floor. So I go, I gotta get the poor guy. I gotta go get the poor guy up again. And I didn't even hear him fall. I guess it was sleep or whatever. So I go in there and open up his bedroom door, and I'm like, oh my God, dude, you're on the floor again. What is wrong with you? We got to go to the doctor, man. I can't keep picking. I got a bad back. I'm an old man. We can't keep doing this. What if I just get on the floor with you? Let's just spend our lives on the floor. Boy, shut up and get me off the floor. Shut up and help me up. Help me up. Help me. Shut up. Help me up. Help him up off the floor. And I'm like, oh my God. You got to consider going back. Anyway, eventually he took a couple of pretty bad tumbles where he decided that he still didn't decide that he was going to go to the hospital. But I tricked him again, told him that we were going to go get some $1 biscuits at McDonald's or whatever. And then he figured out halfway out the door, and he's like, I can't do this. I can't do that. I'm like, you're doing it. We're going. And I lifted him up, picked him up. He's probably, 160 pounds. I didn't care. He was getting to the car. Lifted him up, took him to the car. We got him to the ER. And that was when the doctor was like, the guy's got 4 broken ribs. And he's got, he's 91. And, he's got, I'm going to keep him. He's like, your dad's, everything comes back good on the blood and all the CT scans and everything comes back good. But you got to get him on a walker. And he refused. There was no way he was ever going to get on a walker. And I was like, you're really, am I taking him home like this? He's like, no, we'll keep him. We'll keep him for a night and we'll observe him just because of the confusion. Mm-hmm. Like it wasn't like my dad was out of his mind. Like when I showed up to pick him up, he knew who I was. And the first question they would say would be like, where are you, Mr. Blake? And he would say, the VA hospital. When were you born? He would say, his birthday. He was there, but he kind of had what they call it, sundowners. Mm-hmm. That's what they call it. So anyway, they kept him. And the doctor there was like, your dad's fine. Oh, yeah, it was COVID, crazy, COVID. The hospital was crazy. There was COVID going on. There was people all over that hospital. It was crazy. And the doctor there on the main floor was kind of a little bit overwhelmed. And she was like, your dad's out of here. He's fine. He's out of here. He's no problem. We'll take him home. Just get him on a walker. Make sure he's hydrated. There's no problem. And I'm like, don't rush him out of here. I don't know if I can handle him. I don't know who's going to be able to handle him. Don't rush. Okay, I'll keep him for one more night. But you come back tomorrow. Unless you hear from us, you come back tomorrow and you pick him up. And we'll keep an eye on him, make sure everything's okay, and we'll see you tomorrow. I go to get him the next day, and I'm like, hey, I go to the booth or whatever. Hey, I'm here to pick up Mr. Blake. And they're like, oh, your dad had a bad night. He's in the ICU. Mm-hmm. So I was like, oh, my dad had a bad night. He's in the ICU just like that? Yeah. Well, how come nobody called me and told me that he was in the ICU? Oh, we can't discuss that with you, Mr. Blake. But what we can do is we can direct you to intermediate. It wasn't ICU. It was called intermediate ICU. And I get over there and there's my dad behind a window, totally isolated. He was in like the isolation booth and he's waving at me from behind a window. And I'm like, what the fuck did you do, man? What did you do this time? What did you do to land in this hospital jail? What did you, I walk in, and I had to put on the mask. I had to put on this whole cape. Sure. I had to put on, and I'm like, what did you do? He's like, get me out of here. Get me out of here. Get me out of here. I don't know what's going on. Get me out of here. So I'm like, hang on, let me go talk to the doctor. So I go talk to the doctors and the doctors are like, did you know your dad has COVID? And I was like, oh no, when did that all of a sudden pop up on your radar? And they were like, I was like, he's been to the ER twice. He's been here for 2 nights. And now he has, it's COVID, it's influenza, it's pneumonia. They toggled all over the place for the entire stay with that. COVID, okay. So you're like, damn, how does he pick up COVID? Guess how I picked up COVID?
How did you
just guess?
Guess?
I mean, nobody knows, right? But it's in the hospital. Because it was bad. It was bad. So there's a huge difference between picking up COVID in the hospital and picking it up in your home or picking it up in your community, right? It's way worse.
Yeah, different strains, right?
Way worse. I don't remember exactly how much worse they told me it was, but it's way worse. So he started developing fluid on his lungs, right? And they give him this drug called Lasix, right?
Okay. Yep.
Have you heard of that?
Yeah.
So that takes this, that kind of makes you pee. It removes this pneumonia from your... that's another thing I never knew anything about was pneumonia. But this time it was totally different because I had the power of attorney. So they had to ask me everything. I had to make every decision, for better or for worse. They had to come to me with everything right off the top. They knew, it was documented. I was the power of attorney. So, that's tough. That's really tough. Going into a hospital thinking that you're bringing your father home and he's in the ICU.
Right.
Beep, beep, beep. I'll never forget the sounds. I'll never forget it. So all I wanted to do was to get him out of that situation and get him home. If he was going to die, I wanted him to be able to die, in the right spot. But that ended up being kind of a blessing too, because as a veteran, if you end up passing away in a VA facility, you get a lot of benefits from that. If you pass away within that VA facility, I'm finding out all this stuff. You get some benefits. But anyway, so this is what's weird. So when you get COVID or when you get pneumonia as an old person, any kind of underlying problem that you have, whether it's my dad was leukemia and a little bit of anemia, that's no problem when you're healthy. When you get COVID or when you get pneumonia, those things become big issues. They rise to the top. They become big, gigantic issues. So once they started, his lungs had cleared up. The Lasix had cleared up his lungs, but well, pretty much. But then they were like, we can't give him the Lasix anymore because now he's developed these kidney problems. Now his kidney numbers are off. And I was like, oh, okay, so how are we going to deal with this? And they're like, oh, we got to quit giving him the Lasix. So that was maybe 3 or 4 days in. And that was the first time that I had a doctor come to me and say, your dad's not going to make it out of this hospitalization. And this is how they lead into that. Your dad's 91 years old. He's had a great life. He's not going to make it out of the hospitalization. So I'm like, okay, so obviously you don't know my dad. You don't know him, but I'll go with that. We'll go with that. So you're telling me to quit, right? That it's just over. And they're like, no, we're not telling you to quit, that it's just over, but we're telling you that he's not going to make it out of it. We don't think he's going to make it out of this hospitalization. So I said, okay, well, that's not going to be a good day. So that was pretty rough. But his kidney number came back within 48 hours. But by the time it came back, then the fluid,
it's becoming his MO. He gets something wrong, then he bounces back, and then something else might pop up, and then so they have to treat that, then he bounces back. And what's interesting is that you became, as you mentioned, power of attorney. Kind of, I just view you at one level you have to trust you're not a medical doctor, but you want to trust the expertise of the
absolutely
doctors, right?
And I don't know anything.
But what was
I flunked biology.
But what is that's
I don't know anything.
That's a shame.
Orin Cross.
I think the key is what was, I think, impressive from you, just listening to you over the last several weeks, was that you kind of taught yourself in some level, but also you really learned how to ask questions. And sometimes you were able to ask the right questions where the doctors even then kind of switch paths and that kind of stuff on what they were thinking. So,
well, they can only tell you so much. It's all based on liability,
right?
And it's all kind of political, right? It's only based. It's all once that kidney number got better, but it took 48 hours or 2 or 3 days, and then all the fluid came back to. And Dad had a wet cough. He was dealing with this wet cough and he was losing energy. And then the next thing that came to him was aspirating, which was, he couldn't eat. He, when he was eating or even when he was drinking some fluids, it was going down the wrong tube and it would end up in his lungs. And I've never seen anything,
I mean, we know how bad we cough when it goes down the wrong pipe, right?
Pretty disturbing. Pretty disturbing to see them shove tiny little oil funnel. We used to pour oil in those funnels.
Yeah.
Right. In your car. And then, so like a little mini one of those, they would shove all the way up like into his brain through his nose. And, you used to be sitting because he couldn't breathe. His oxygen number would go down when that stuff got into his lungs. And one time, my mom was there with me when that happened, and we had been feeding him, and it went down the wrong tube. And he was coughing like that, and then they stick a tube that goes all the way down into the lung, and it ends up coming out. And I'm like, is that what you guys have to do? Yeah, and that's when I learned about what aspirating was, right? So then he started to, they're trying to get him to cough. They're trying to get him to get all this phlegm and junk and inflammation and all this stuff out of his lungs. They're, get your dad to cough, Right. But he wasn't eating because he was afraid that they were going to do that to him again. And it was going to go down there and he wouldn't eat and he wouldn't drink anything. And aspirating, dude. I mean, every time I cough now, I think about my dad. Like there's little weird things that happen like that. So he just became scared to death, right? And then they also did this thing where when he would cough, they would stick this fucking tube, dude, down. That was like a foot long, and it was like it had a it had a suction. They called it suctioning, and my dad wouldn't open his mouth. So one day I went in there and my dad's front tooth was chipped out Front tooth was completely chipped out. I'm like, Dad, we got to take you to the dentist. What happened? And then one day I was there when he would cough and he couldn't get it out. So they would shove that fucking thing. They would shove that thing down his throat like they didn't give a crap about him. And my dad wouldn't open his mouth because they were shoving it in there like a freaking chisel. They were just shoving it in there and pulling out like, a teeny little bit of juice. They weren't getting anything. And my dad would, he was like, he didn't want to, we couldn't get, I had to get him to open his mouth. And then when I saw what they were doing to him, I was like, okay, that's done. That's done. No more. There's no more of that. And the way the doctors told me about that, this is all funny. I mean, it's not funny because my dad's gone, but this is why you don't want to go to a hospital. So the doctors they just said, oh, we've been suctioning him, right? I was like, oh, okay, that's great because we want to get that stuff out of his lungs.
You view of a newborn infant where they have the suctions and stuff. Just a pleasant experience. Yeah. It's all part of the.
And my dad was in my whole thing with my dad was comfort and no suffering. That was my whole thing. And dude, he just refused to open his mouth. So the doctors, I go, they're like, yeah, we can keep. And I was telling the doctors, I'm like, nurse can't do that. That's over. No more of that suctioning crap anymore. Dude, they're trying to kill him. The back of his throat, I looked at the back of his throat. The back of his throat was all screwed up. And then his nose was getting all screwed up from the things that were shoving up on his nose. And I was like, yeah, man, they can't do that suctioning thing anymore. What's that all about? And he's like, oh yeah, he's biting it, right? I'm like, are you telling me that you knew the entire time that my dad lost his tooth and I asked you about that like several times and you didn't tell me. And now all of a sudden you're saying, oh yeah, he was biting down on it. Yeah, he was biting down on it because your nurse was shoving it halfway down his throat and pulling out like a tiny little booger. Nothing. Right. So I had to deal with that. I'm going to have to live with that forever. Right. Because my whole thing was no suffering. So one thing kind of led to another. And my dad had a lot of setbacks.
But you're knowing all this because you're going every day.
Every day.
This is important note that you weren't just going home and hanging out for a couple of days and then checking in on them. You were going every day. Every day, all day. And you never know what is coming from behind the curtain. So you would I'd wake up in the morning and you would look at your phone and you would just wait for the call. You would like wait for your dad's dead, or your dad had a setback. And he had a bunch of stuff started to pile up on him. So he had fluid on the lungs, and then the kidney came back, and then low platelets because he had leukemia, a very mild form of leukemia. But once again, if you get COVID or some form of pneumonia, then your blood is an issue, right? So they couldn't do anything to go. He had developed all of this, they couldn't get rid of all this fluid. And there are these things called phlegm plugs, mucus plugs that will develop when you're not drinking and you're not eating anything. Your body's not getting hydrated and you have all of this inflammation and you have all of this infection and all this fluid. You develop these mucus plugs that will absolutely plug up your bronchioles. Right. And you can't breathe. You literally cannot breathe. So that became a huge issue with the blood, with the leukemia, because they were unable to do an invasive deal where they could go in there with it, go down into the lung and suck all that stuff out, because there's like a 70% chance that they're going to nick you. And if they nick you and you bleed, it's over. Right. It's all over. So it was, one thing kind of after the next. Any procedure at that age, it's just the risks. That's what you alluded to this before, of sometimes thinking, maybe we pass on that procedure, or we don't do this.
You have to make those decisions. Yeah. You have to make I would literally wake up in the morning and I would be like looking at my phone, and I would just be like, I got other people to handle my business. my job so that I could handle my dad full time. So I would wait for that brutal San Carlos Avenue traffic to go by at 8:30, where, if anything ever happens, any kind of a tornado hits or any kind of a earthquake, dude, we're completely screwed. Like, you're not getting out of San Carlos Avenue.
No one's going anywhere.
Yeah, no one, Alameda, Ralston, San Carlos Avenue, you're not going anywhere.
Especially hits during school time. Yeah, during school pickup or drop off, right?
Yeah. So I had to wait out. So I would just sit there, and there was like the danger zone, right? Once they didn't call me with the setback at like 8:30 or 9, I knew I was pretty much good. I knew that he had a pretty good night. I didn't hear anything about anything going on. They would call me with, we're going to try these blood transfusions. Your dad had a bad night. He didn't sleep. We're going to try this. We're going to try that. But, if I got past, 8 or 9 o'clock, and you never knew, if you didn't hear anything, you never knew what was behind the curtain. And I was on my own. There was nobody going with me. I was going by myself. So I'd get off that elevator and go down to the beep, 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 people, all that crap that happens in an ICU. And then you would make a right, and then I would make another right down another corridor, and there would be Dad. And that would be the first thing I would do, would just peek around just to see if he was still kicking. If there was an oxygen mask on him, if there wasn't an oxygen mask on him, I'd look at the numbers, his blood pressure and everything. You never knew what you were getting. And then there would be a nurse who would watch him all night. I'd say, how'd Dad do? Where's his, he did okay, whatever. Okay, so where's the lung scan? Because they would do x-rays of his lungs like every day. How did he do on that? How are his platelets? How are his platelets? Like, where's his kidney number? How's he been doing? And then I'd go in there and I'd be like, hey, big boy, you have to put on a face, right? I don't want him to see any concern. How you doing, big boy? What's happening? How we doing today? Are we going to get you home? They're talking about getting you home, but you got to fight. You're going to have to fight. You got to show him that you're going to eat something, because he wasn't eating. And that's bad. So they had all these drips. They had a magnesium drip. They had hydrogen drip, because he was afraid to aspirate. So, come on, Dad. How you doing, man? And I would just spend as long as I could there. I would talk to the doctors every day. And but he would have all these setbacks. And they would be like, okay, so here's an example of a setback. So he was doing so well. And they tell you every day that your dad's going to die. He's 91, he's not going to make it. You have a 20% chance. He might make it. We can try this, right? That's kind of the attitude. So he had another comeback. They thought he was dead, and his lungs cleared up, and he was sitting up on the side of the bed. He was smiling and laughing and, doing well. And I was begging them to get him out of the bed, to allow him to sit up. But I guess there's some sort of a liability going on with that too. They wouldn't do that. So he was just lying around the whole time. And as you can imagine, if you're lying around with fluid on your lungs, it's not doing you any good.
No.
All right. So they wouldn't do that. So we started doing it. One example of a comeback from Dad is they were like, oh my God, your dad is unbelievable. We got the scans back today. They're great. He's been in a great mood. We were able to get a little bit of food in him. He's taking his meds. He's been drinking a little bit. So we're going to get him out of the ICU. And I was like, oh, okay, great. All right. Well, we don't know when, but we're going to get him out of the ICU. So, and that was on a Sunday. I'll never forget that. That was on a Sunday. And, they put him on a flat gurney. They put him on a flat gurney. Remember that story?
Yep.
Put him on a flat gurney, and they moved him to the other side of the hospital. What are you thinking? There were like these moves that were made. I'm not going to dwell on all that, but there were these moves that were made throughout this process that were just crazy. There were mistakes that like the common dickhead wouldn't make, let alone some Stanford doctor of 30 years. It was just crazy. Why would you put, okay, so anyway, they put him on a flat gurney. They're getting him out. They get him to the other room on the other side of the hospital. And, by the time they get him onto that bed, he lasts maybe 30 minutes, 20 minutes or whatever before he's aspirating again. He's choking on everything again. All right.
Yep.
I'm like, okay. So the way I find out about that is they're like, yeah, I got a call in the morning. Oh, your dad had a bad night. So I go in and dad's got a oxygen mask back on again. He had gotten off the oxygen mask. Now he's got an oxygen mask on again and looks out of it, completely out of it. And I'm like, what happened? He's like, oh, well, he aspirated. There's like a team of doctors and they're like, he aspirated. We tried to move him out. And oh, by the way, I think that maybe gravity had something. The lead doctor, they call him the supervisor. He goes, they get a new supervisor each week. And the supervisor was like, oh yeah, I think gravity may have had something to do with that. And I'm like, gravity? What are you talking about? He's like, oh, we put him on a flat gurney. Like all casual, high five, like all casual. Like, okay, so you're telling me that this guy's been aspirating. He's got oxygen issues. He's got all, and you put him on a flat gurney? Yeah, I guess, I wasn't really there, but I think that's what I was told, that it was a fight. Okay. So there's another setback. So those are how the setbacks sort of occur, right? They're not self-inflicted, right? Because he's just laying around the whole time. It's usually decisions that are made when I was not around to be. But
then you told me that you started saying, okay, guys, anytime you feel like he's made an improvement, you want to move him, wait 24 hours. You said every time you've made a move right when he's gotten better, he's had a setback.
Yeah, they're trying to rush him out.
Right.
They want to get that bed filled, right? They're trying to get funded, right? They want to move him out of there. So eventually I was like, don't push him. Don't push him. They were like, yeah, your dad's not going to make it. This was like, your dad's not going to make it. Your dad's not going to make it. Your dad's not going to make it. You might as well just quit. Was kind of like the mantra. So I was like, okay, so you're telling me that we're at the OK Corral and the Indians are surrounding us, and all I have left is my 6-shooter and with 6 bullets in it, and all I should do is kind of drop it. Can you get him back to where we were before? Can you get him back to where we were? Oh, I'm pretty confident we can get him back there. Okay, so let's make a couple of changes, right? So if we can get him back to where he was when he comes back, when you think he's great and you want to move him again, first, don't use a flat gurney. And then secondly, let's wait another 24 hours, right? When you think he's great, let's wait. Let's use that as a slogan. When you think he's great, let's wait. And by the way, I'm not dropping the 6-shooter. I'm using the bullets. I'm not going to make him suffer. I'm not going to, this is not about me. But my father, when he had come back, he had this death rattle. He was like, trying to talk. And it was killing me. I couldn't understand. What, Dad? What are you saying to me? What? He was trying. When he got his voice back, 3 days later, when he got his voice back, 2 or 3 days later, when he got his voice back, I said, Dad, we got to fight. Are we going to fight or are you done? They're telling me to drop the 6-shooter. They're telling me to lay it on the ground and let you go. Do you want to die? Do you want to die or do you want to stay? What do you want to do, Dad? Do you want to die or what do you want? You can let go. You can let go. I got it all handled.
A whole lot of nothing burger right here. Don't listen.
Hey, this is Big Red. I just wanted to say, hey, thank you very much for sticking with us and listening to the Don't Listen Chumcast. And my summary, my tribute to my father. And I want you to stay tuned for part 2.
Don't listen. A Basic Chumcast has been an exclusive presentation of Whetstone Entertainment in association with Is Chill Productions. Subscribe, follow, like, and share us while on your favorite social media hangouts and our YouTube channel. We're not into begging, but if you like us, review us and support us by continuing to check us out on your favorite podcast platforms. Find more fun and hit us with your feedback at don'tlistenchumcast.com.
Yeah, that's fantastic.